Are you familiar with justice as fairness? If so, the main proponent of justice as fairness is John Rawls. That was born February 21, 1921. This is John Rawls. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland, USA. Died on the age of 81 last November 24, 2022. The concept of justice as fairness was developed by the philosopher John Rawls, who argued that a just society is one in which the basic rights and freedoms of individuals are protected, and in which social and economic inequalities are arranged to benefit the least advantaged. Rawls believed that a just society is one in which individuals have equal access to opportunities and resources, regardless of their social status, race, or other personal characteristics. In order to achieve this kind of society, Rawls proposed a hypothetical social contract in which individuals would agree on a set of principles that would govern their society. These principles would include a commitment to equal basic liberties, equal opportunities for social and economic advancement, and a fair distribution of resources and opportunities that takes into account the needs and interests of all members of society. Rawls argued that this approach to justice is based on a fundamental sense of fairness, and that it provides a framework for creating a just and stable society that benefits everyone. There are a lot of assumptions of this theory, thus we will discuss all of it for us to be aware about it. Justice as fairness is a political theory that is based on several key assumptions. The first assumption is that individuals are rational and self-interested, and therefore will act in their own best interests. However, they can also recognize that cooperation and collaboration with others can help them achieve their goals more effectively. The second assumption is that individuals have a sense of justice, which allows them to recognize what is fair and unfair. This sense of justice is innate and universal, and it allows individuals to judge the fairness of social institutions and practices. The third assumption is that individuals are situated within a social context, and their opportunities and outcomes are affected by social and economic structures. Therefore, a just society must be structured in a way that provides equal opportunities for all individuals to achieve their goals and realize their potential. The fourth assumption is that individuals have a right to basic liberties, including freedom of speech, assembly, and religion. These liberties must be protected in order for individuals to pursue their own interests and goals. The fifth assumption is that social and economic inequalities can be justified only if they benefit the least advantaged members of society. This means that any social or economic system must be designed in a way that provides opportunities and resources for those who are most in need. Overall, the assumptions of justice as fairness are grounded in a commitment to creating a society that is based on equal opportunities, basic liberties, and a fair distribution of resources and opportunities for all individuals, regardless of their background or social status. Justice as fairness views on taxation. In the context of taxation, Rawls asserts that a just tax system should be designed to maximize the benefits for the least advantaged members of society while still providing the necessary resources to promote the general welfare. He believes that taxation should be progressive, meaning that those with higher incomes should pay a larger proportion of their income in taxes than those with lower incomes. Additionally, Rawls argues that taxes should be used to fund public goods and services that are necessary for a just society, such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Finally, he maintains that taxation should be transparent and consistent, and that the burdens and benefits of taxation should be distributed fairly among all members of society. Views on abortion. Rawls argues for a society based on equal basic rights and opportunities for all citizens. In the context of abortion, Rawls would likely argue that a just society should respect the right of women to make decisions about their own bodies, including the decision to have an abortion. Rawls would view this issue through the lens of his two principles of justice. The first principle requires that each person has the same basic rights and liberties, including the right to control their own body, while the second principle requires that social and economic inequalities should be arranged so as to benefit the least advantaged members of society. Rawls would likely argue that denying women the right to have an abortion would be a violation of their basic rights and would disproportionately harm women who are already disadvantaged in other ways. However, Rawls would also acknowledge that there are differing views on the moral status of the fetus, and that a just society should provide opportunities for individuals and groups to engage in public reasoning and debate about this issue in a fair and respectful manner. Views on divorce. In the context of justice's fairness, divorce is not inherently right or wrong, but rather it depends on the circumstances surrounding the divorce. In the case of divorce, justice's fairness would suggest that individuals have the right to end their marriage if it is no longer serving their interests or if it is causing harm to themselves or their children. However, this decision should be made in a fair and just manner, taking into account the needs and interests of all parties involved. For example, if one partner is engaging in abusive behavior, justice's fairness would suggest that the other partner has the right to leave the marriage and seek protection for themselves and their children. Similarly, if the marriage is no longer fulfilling for both parties and they have tried all reasonable attempts to reconcile, divorce may be the best option for everyone involved. Overall, justice's fairness would suggest that divorce can be a just and fair decision, as long as it is made with consideration for the well-being and rights of all parties involved. Views on isabang. When it comes to the practice of isabang, or online cockfighting, opinions on its morality may vary depending on one's interpretation of justice's fairness. Some might argue that isabang is an acceptable form of entertainment, while others might view it as a form of animal cruelty and exploitation. From a justice's fairness perspective, it is important to consider the potential harms and benefits of isabang. On the one hand, proponents might argue that it provides a source of income for those involved in the industry, and allows people to participate in a traditional cultural practice. On the other hand, opponents might argue that the practice is unethical, as it involves subjecting animals to physical harm for the sake of human entertainment. Ultimately, whether isabang is deemed right or wrong from a justice's fairness perspective will depend on one's interpretation of the principles of justice and the balance of potential harms and benefits associated with the practice. The concept of same-sex unions is often discussed in the context of justice and fairness because it involves the recognition of the equal rights and dignity of all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation. Advocates for same-sex unions argue that denying same-sex couples the right to marry or form legal unions is unjust and unfair, as it deprives them of the same legal protections and benefits afforded to heterosexual couples. Proponents of same-sex unions also argue that it is a matter of fairness and justice to allow individuals to form relationships and families based on their own preferences and desires, rather than being restricted by societal norms or religious beliefs that may discriminate against them. They argue that denying individuals the right to form same-sex unions is an infringement on their fundamental human rights and violates the principles of equality and non-discrimination. Opponents of same-sex unions may argue that the recognition of such unions goes against traditional values or religious beliefs, and that allowing same-sex couples to marry or form legal unions would undermine the institution of marriage itself. However, advocates for same-sex unions counter that allowing individuals to form legal unions based on their own preferences and desires does not necessarily undermine the institution of marriage, but rather expands the definition of marriage to be more inclusive and reflective of the diversity of human relationships and experiences. Overall, the debate surrounding same-sex unions is complex and multifaceted, and involves considerations of justice, fairness, human rights, and societal norms and values. Euthanasia. When it comes to the issue of euthanasia, Rawls' theory can be interpreted in different ways. On one hand, some argue that allowing euthanasia would be consistent with Rawls' principles of justice as fairness, as it would give individuals the right to control their own bodies and make decisions about their own lives. This could be seen as an extension of the principle of liberty, which Rawls argues should be maximized as long as it does not harm others. On the other hand, others argue that euthanasia could be seen as a violation of Rawls' principle of justice, which requires that social and economic inequalities are arranged to benefit the least advantaged members of society. If euthanasia were available only to those who could afford it, it could exacerbate existing inequalities and potentially lead to the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Ultimately, the interpretation of Rawls' theory with regards to euthanasia depends on how one weighs the principle of liberty and justice, and the role that individual autonomy plays in creating a just society. That's all. I hope you have gathered a lot of insights in our presentation. Thanks for watching.